A while back, I made a video about how I appreciated the series Marvel Spider-Man, and now in this video, I'll be talking about the most recent arc, Maximum Venom. This is more of a part 2 of my last video on why Marvel Spider-Man is worth the watch, slash review of the latest season and where I'd like the show to go in the next season if there is a next season, but I'll get to that later. So without further ado, let's get into it. The one thing about this recent season that differs from the previous ones is the new 1 hour episodes. The new format consists of 6 40 to 45-minute episodes due to writing and supervising producers Kevin Burke and Chris Wyatt wanting to tell more stories that they usually wouldn't be able to do with the 22-minute runtime. I don't have a problem with the new format. I actually prefer this. The only downside is that instead of every week, there's a new episode every month. But that didn't stop me from watching it. If anything, it just made me keep up with the show's schedule even more. So the first episode of the season is Web of Venom, written by Kevin Burke and Chris Wyatt, and directed by Tim Eldred and Sol Choi. The episode starts off with Spider-Man in a training simulation created by the main cast at Horizon High, but the system malfunctions right when it's time for them to head for their college tour, which Peter misses because he forgot to sign up due to Spider-Man's responsibility in his everyday life. Something I only just now realized is that in the simulation, Flint Marko's Sandman is shown, but if I'm not mistaken, he was killed by his daughter, who then became the new Sandman, or Sandwoman, but I don't know. Dude's made of sand, so I suppose it'd be pretty hard to get rid of him. Peter states that between high school and being Spider-Man,
Between high school and being Spider-Man, I haven't had a second to think about my future.
in my opinion, this has to be one of the episodes where we truly see the struggles of Peter within this universe. Also, something I noticed and couldn't get over during my initial viewing of this was the subtle changes in Spider-Man's suit. We saw his last suit get torn to shreds during the Goblin War, and they could have just drawn the same one, but the fact that they didn't is one of the things that parts this Spider-Man show from previous ones. They even give the main characters new designs with each season, which again they don't have to, but shows just how much they care about the project. I believe these designs were intended to match the promotional art done by Patrick Brown, but whether that's true or not, I always like seeing animated characters in different clothing than the usual ones we see them in. Peter finds Max Modell in his lab experimenting with the new synthetic symbiote created by a sample of a Venom symbiote. Although this version is much safer than its original counterpart and lacks any sentience. Max is confident on his decision to continue experimenting on Venom, while Peter tries to explain to him just how dangerous and unforeseen the consequences are, considering they still don't understand why the symbiote arrives to Earth in the first place. They're interrupted when Max is reminded about the new student tour, which Peter takes care of so his mentor can clean up his laboratory. The new student turns out to be Grady Scraps, played by Scott Menville, who is also Jimmy from Ben 10 Ultimate Alien as well as Omniverse. He transfers schools when Spider-Man, along with Miss Marvel and the rest of the Avengers, stops Ames front within Bilderberg back in Season 2 episode School of Hard Knocks. I know some fans didn't really see a reason for Grady to attend Horizon, and even though he's just comic relief and has slight character development, I do enjoy whenever he's on screen.
No way! I met Tony Stark. We're kind of buddies, really.
That's cool. I'm actually pretty good friends with Spider-Man.
Wow, name dropping. You must be pretty insecure. Did I mention I also met the Hulk once?
Peter's tour leads them to the Project Graveyard, where they run into Yuri Lowenthal's Dr. Kirk Connors. Side note, I would like to express how much I enjoy Yuri in villain roles. That is all. We get our first mention of Mary Jane during that night at dinner when Peter gets a call from Grady, who activates the failed project known as Technovore. Now, Technovore is an Iron Man villain who made his debut in Iron Man 294 in July of 1993, having only a handful of appearances, one being in the animated show Iron Man Armored Adventures, although the first time I was introduced to the character was in Iron Man Rise of the Technovore, which I remember being an okay movie. Maybe, I don't know, I only saw it once. I might review it in another video. Peter and Grady team up to disable Technovore, but fail to do so because of its ability to absorb technology, and thanks to Dr. Connors, who investigates the commotion, the project escapes and begins to run rampant among the school. Peter suits up as Spider-Man and takes on the Technovore, but fails again once the creature eats his web suiters. Max and Spidey then team up to stop the creature. After revealing he knows Peter's identity from the events of Goblin War, he gives Peter the synthetic symbiote, which upgrades his suit in addition to giving them the traditional symbiotic abilities. Spider-Man defeats Technovore with the help of his peers, and the first part of the episode ends with Peter agreeing to help Max with experimenting on the symbiote just before Connors shows speaking to an unknown character. While Spider-Man begins training with his new synthetic symbiote, although the possibilities of the new suit seem to be limitless, it still attains the weakness of an actual symbiote. They are interrupted when Spider-Man has to stop a runaway train, which he achieves to do so, and realizes that they have a lot more to learn about the new suit, when it's revealed that it's only affected by certain types of electricity. Max throws a hypothetical scenario that maybe Peter should tell the world about his identity as Spider-Man, but unlike his mentor, Peter doesn't feel that would be a good idea, although I think he does have some good reasons. Everyone knows who the Avengers are, and the amount of stress of not being able to tell anyone he's Spider-Man is a lot for Peter. After cleanup, they run into Connors, who grows suspicious of the two before acting suspicious himself, and is caught within Max's lab, causing Venom to escape and take over his body. Spider-Man chases and fights Venom, leading to his new suit to be absorbed by the symbiote, making him whole again. I personally like, for a Spider-Man show, to give Peter the symbiote for an entire season rather than the usual 2 or 3 episodes. Like at the beginning of the season, he succumbs to the symbiote and doesn't really think anything of it besides a suit upgrade, and then towards the middle of the season, you could have him start lashing out at his friends or show Spider-Man being violent towards his rogues gallery, with the two-parter being at the end of the season where he realizes the suit, although at first maybe had good intentions, but ended up manipulating his actions and feeling betrayed because his host rejected him, leading towards an end stinger showing Venom in their full form with Eddie Brock. I don't think they needed to get rid of it, but nonetheless I did like this new artificial symbiote and the little time we had with it. After following Venom across the city to the original crash site where the alien landed on Earth, which is the same spot the symbiote planted a seed, Spider-Man defeats Venom with the help of Grady and Max, using a specific type of electricity and the power of science. Max is then put under investigation by the school board due to his experimentation with Venom, while Connors is put in his place, and the episode ends with the seed being revealed not to be a bomb as the characters believe it to be, but a beacon in order to tell the other symbiotes where the Earth's location was. Overall, this first episode was really enjoyable. I believe the Web of Venom episode was the one I saw the most out of the entire season, and in my opinion, had some of the more greater fight sequences of the show. The next episode of the season is Amazing Friends, written by Meryl Hagen and directed by Tim Eldred and Sol Choi. This episode is not only one of the more comedic ones, but also introduces 4 new heroes in the form of Groot, Ironheart, Doctor Strange, and a new Hulk, while also giving us hints of a much bigger threat down the line. After stopping a bank robbery, Peter fills Miles in on the recent events that happened with Max and Venom when Peter suddenly remembers that he's late for dinner with his new neighbor. But as soon as he arrives home, he finds Groot hiding in his closet with a message from Star-Lord on a cassette tape that suddenly breaks. Before he can process what's going on, Groot stumbles upon his web shooters and heads downstairs, where hijinks ensue while he's trying to act as normal as he can in front of his new neighbor, Mary Jane. Peter eventually catches Groot, takes him back to Horizon to figure out Groot's message with Miles, but when that fails, they head to the Avengers Tower where they meet Riri Williams' Ironheart. Now, this version of Ironheart is voiced by Sophia Wiley, who also voices the character in Marvel Rising, where she's on a team full of the next generation of superheroes led by Quake and Captain Marvel. But I always found it weird that these two shows kind of ran at the same time and had not all of the same characters, but a few we've seen in Spider-Man, like Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and they even have a Ghost Spider. Initially, when the show first came out, I thought that maybe these events took place sometime after the events of Marvel Spider-Man, or maybe they were doing the shared universe thing with their shows like they did back in the 90s, or more recently with Ultimate Spider-Man and Avengers Assemble. But nothing added up. I don't know why they weren't connected. Both shows were made by the same animation studio, and it just seems like something they do. I tried to find something on it, but I couldn't. Maybe they just simply didn't want to, but if you have anything on why, feel free to let me know. Riri attempts to contact the Space Administration, who suspiciously arrive within seconds, but they turn out to be AIM agents working alongside Baron Mordo. During the fight, Groot gets into more mischief and ends up getting lost in New York, causing the heroes to split up with Peter and Riri heading off to look for Groot, while Miles searches for Doctor Strange so that he can translate the message. There's a moment where Ironheart and Peter bond over their past experiences, which I found quite nice. She doesn't have a lot of friends or powers, at least no biological powers, while he has plenty of friends along with powers. But their differences are kind of used to bring them closer and allow them to relate in a nice little scene. While Miles meets Doctor Strange, the others do their best to fend off against AIM while keeping Groot safe. Baron Mordo enters the fight, and the playing field is level once Miles arrives with Strange. After an entertaining fight sequence, Groot is captured by AIM, Strange and Miles are transported into another dimension, and Riri and Peter are left thinking about their next steps. Ironheart then follows the energy signature left behind by Mordo's portals, and are then led to an AIM headquarters on the island, where Amadeus Cho-Hulk arrives to help them out. Now, I'm not the biggest Hulk fan. I probably know about a few Hulks, but still don't know that much about them besides Bruce Banner, Red Hulk. I know a little bit about A-Bomb, She-Hulk, and I thought Club from Actus was a pretty interesting character. But when it comes to like Devil Hulk, Savage Hulk, and all the others, I'm lost. My knowledge of the Hulk character comes from the MCU, as well as Hulk's and the Agents of Smash, that ran for like 1 or 2 seasons. But what I do know about Cho's Hulk is that he's pretty fun to play as in Lego Marvel Superheroes 2. Meanwhile, Miles and Doctor Strange try to get back into the real world and realize they're trapped, and that the negative reality is shrinking, while also preventing Strange from using his powers. Riri says that there are other interns in the Avengers program, but we never really get a hint on who they are, although they probably be, well, my guess is that they probably are more characters from the Champions team, but I still would have liked a hint as to who they were. Peter ends up having to take up a leadership role when Yuri and Amadeus butt heads and ends up getting them out of a sticky situation no pun intended, as well as getting the drop on Mordo and Monica Rappaccini, but who plans on using Groot's abilities to create scientific and magical combined monsters known as golems. Just like the villains of the episode, Strange and Miles combine science and magic to escape the negative reality and help save the day. The episode ends with Ironheart breaking down her walls and suggesting that they all hang out. One thing that is brought up a lot in this episode is the Avengers Internship, and almost every time it is, Peter is a bit bitter considering that he hadn't been reproached for it even though he's teamed up with the Avengers, but is informed that it's a program for heroes in training, and the Avengers already thought of him as a superhero to begin with. Strange finally translates Star-Lord's message, warning Spider-Man that the symbiotes are headed to Earth and that he's the last and only line of defense. I think I like this episode a lot more for its comedic moments than anything else. A lot of shows kind of struggle at the beginning, but I feel like to me at least, this show's comedy has just been there from the beginning. I know they set up Mary Jane, and in almost every piece of Spider-Man material, they're the ones to end up together, but I really enjoyed his chemistry with Ironheart. Next episode up is Vengeance of Venom, written by J.M. DeMatteis and directed by So Choi yet again, as well as Tim Eldred. I definitely remember this episode mostly because of its second half, but we'll obviously get to those events later. The episode starts with Peter giving a recap on the current events and trying to figure out how he can help his Aunt May stay safe. Spider-Man and Ironheart are patrolling the streets, and along with the other Avenger interns, Spiders and Doctor Strange, are planning for the imminent symbiote invasion. The Avengers suddenly return from an unknown space mission, but it's soon revealed that they have been taken over by the symbiotes, and the battle for the Earth begins. What I loved about the promotion for the season was seeing Patrick Brown's amazing art on the Venomized heroes. They looked really cool, but I was still curious as to how they'd be used within the show. Some of the final results of the Venomized heroes are different from the promotional art, but it was still really cool to see Iron Man's faceplate lift up, and instead of Tony Stark's face, you get a symbiote face and watch it consume and take over the Iron Man armor. I also enjoyed how the heroes' powers shifted into a more symbiotic moveset. They end up trapping the symbiotes thanks to Stark's defense system, but Iron Man's symbiote uses its host's memories to deactivate the protocol, which is when everything starts to go south, and some of our heroes are caught under the influence of the symbiotes. Spider-Man and Ironheart get away, but the symbiote ship is getting closer and closer to Earth with every passing moment. During my first viewing of this episode, I got a "is this really happening" feeling, especially after the end of the first half. Riri and Peter search for Cloak and Dagger in order for them to use Cloak's abilities to transfer the symbiotes to another dimension, but they realize when they're too late when they find this.
Oh.
Only a few heroes in the city are left, and eventually it's all up to Spider-Man with the help of Grady to disrupt the symbol of the symbiote seed. He ends up destroying the seed, and everything seems to be going well for the Spider Team. That is until Venomized Doctor Strange, or the Symbiote Supreme, shows up and turns the tables, using the Sorcerer's abilities to restore the seed and venomize the remaining heroes. Next to Miles' design, this is my favorite Venomized character in the show. We're then left with Peter atop of a bridge, looking out over the Venomized City of Destruction, looking as if all hope was lost. With Spider-Man being the only hero left, he heads home and finds himself having to take on a lot more than he can handle, but is then saved by Mark Spector. Now, if you're familiar with that character, then you already know who it is, and me, Remembering this is a spoiler discussion has no reason as to why I'm trying to be vague. It's Moon Knight. But thanks to info given to us by Ironheart earlier on, no one's seen Moon Knight in weeks, and it's clear that he's hung up the hood and cape so far as to not even bother trying to restore what little of humanity is left, and has the plan to survive underneath the surface until the invasion has passed. Spider-Man convinces Mark to help him save Max, and the two do so, finding out that Groot's biology is resisting the infection, giving him the idea to create an anti-venom. We get Moon Knight's backstory, and I gotta say, I enjoy how he contrasts with Spider-Man. After parting ways with Spidey and Max, Mark meets Aunt May, as well as the other members of the Resistance. One thing about this Aunt May is the same thing I liked about Ultimate Spider-Man's Aunt May. I want to say she's like late 50s, early 60s. She's still getting herself out there and having fun instead of constantly being in the house all day, worrying about bills or having fond memories of Uncle Ben. Yes, recalling events of a past loved one is normal, as well as having financial problems, but unlike most iterations of the character, she's clearly moved on and is enjoying her life to the fullest, regardless of her age. Spider-Man and Max are tracked down by the Venomized Avengers, but as soon as they are cornered, Moon Knight returns and enters the fight along with the Resistance. Max's body enhanced Venom Groot's antibodies and turned him into anti-venom, thus destroying the symbiote and saving the day. I enjoyed the impact Spider-Man and May had on Moon Knight. They both, in their own way, turned this cold-hearted man who gave up on the ideas of being a superhero into a new, reformed person who has a better look on life. Next episode, Spider-Man Unmasked. Written by Jim Martin and Gavin Hignite, and directed by the same duo as the previous episode, Tim Eldred and Sol Choi. When Alexei is transformed back into the Rhino, Spider-Man finds himself involved in dangerous underground experiments and runs into a new villain known as Swarm. 2 months after the events of Vengeance of Venom, Spider-Man Peter Parker is on his way towards Horizon High with a drive containing evidence to prove Max's innocence in order for him to return to school when he's suddenly attacked by the Tinkerer. I said this before, but I cannot appreciate how the character's clothing changes with each season, and it's not just the main characters, as we see with the Tinkerer, who's got new toys and a new haircut. There probably wasn't a reason to add this fight in the beginning, but I enjoyed it. Watching the heroes of the show just not take Tinkerer seriously is always fun to watch, and Aaron Abrams' take on the character is always entertaining. Peter arrives at the meeting with video evidence of the late Otto Octavius stating how good of a man Max is. I enjoy Otto's character arc. He went from school teacher to hero to villain to anti-hero back to hero, and sacrificed himself for Peter, the only one person he truly hated, who would become one of his only few friends. If that's not the best character arc in the show, I don't know what is. Connor's concerts just before the recess, but they're informed if Alexei were to be the final testimony, the board could be swayed and Max could return to his job. Peter goes to the student's house to find it in a wreck and goes off with Spider-Man to track him down, leading him to find the Rhino, which leads to a fight, which then leads to him following the Rhino to wherever he came from. He informs Miles, who almost lets Peter's identity slip with the girls but quickly saves it. I don't know why, but before this episode, I always thought that in between seasons 2 and 3, they all shared their identities with one another, and everyone knew who everyone was. But this just confirmed that wasn't the case. I don't know why Peter could trust Miles with his identity and not the other Spider people, but yeah, I don't know. In my opinion, it just makes sense that he let them know. Spider-Man finds himself in an underground laboratory where he meets Swarm. The only thing I know about Swarm is that I believe the character was in the prequel book to Insomniac's Spider-Man game. Peter's off doing Spider-Man stuff and fighting Swarm and Rhino, causing Miles and the others to stall for time until he gets back with Alexi. While Anya is distracting the board, Miles, Gwen, and Spidey reverse engineer the Rhino serum into a cure and inject it within Rhino, only to find out that this isn't their Rhino. Just as it seems like all hope is lost, Spider-Man stands among the school board, informing them on the times when Max helped him save the day. Connors then outs Spider-Man, letting the board know that the hero had been an accomplice of Max and led to the symbiote attack on the city, and informs them on his identity as Peter Parker. In order to protect Max, Peter confirms his identity, but no longer being able to testify, but due to him helping Max with the Venom experiments. Max is then removed as principal, with Connors taking his place temporarily. Right when things seemed as though they couldn't get any worse, the Rhino Peter found before and puts under the watch of Grady escapes, with Grady giving a pretty funny explanation on how the situation went down. The Spiders head back to the Swarm's lab, but finds out that everything is gone, then decides to split up, with Spider-Girl, Miles, and Ghost Spider heading off to search for Rhino, and Peter going home to examine one of Swarm's bees. Now, I'm more of a Gwen Stacy type of guy, but we do have a nice little moment between Peter and MJ, where she cheers him up and motivates him not to let his feelings sit and go talk to his friends. I can understand why Anya and Gwen were mad at Peter for not telling them that he was Spider-Man. Like I said, I assumed they'd already knew at the beginning of the season, but I think the way they handled it kind of dragged on for a bit too long. Peter says he thought he was doing the right thing, which I guess makes sense, but considering that they have their own powers and have shown in The Day Without Spider-Man that they can handle their own, I don't see how keeping his identity a secret from them is doing the right thing. The other spiders run into a few more rhinos than they thought they would, with Peter turning for the one person he can turn for help, Grady. Another thing I liked about the show is Peter's support system. If he's got a problem, he can turn to someone either in the superhero world or at school and use their advice not only to save the day, but become a better person. With the help of Grady, Peter figures out where the laboratory is before getting captured by Swarm and waking up in an underground monster fighting arena with his team. Dr. Connors, along with his unknown associate, as well as every other underground criminal, watch the fight as the Spider Team finally apologize to one another and defeat Swarm's monsters with the power of science and friendship, although Swarm himself gets away. The episode then ends with the head administrator telling Peter that the proceeds of the hearing were sealed, and no one would be legally allowed to reveal his identity as Spider-Man, but is warned that Spider-Man's presence on school grounds would have consequences, with Connor spying on their conversation. We get another nice Peter and MJ moment before the credits roll. Generations is the following episode, being written by Marty Eisenberg and May Catt, while being directed yet again by Tim Eldred and Sol Troy. At the beginning of this episode, we see just how much Horizon has changed since Dr. Connors took over as principal. They give us that eerie and nightmarish tone to it, which I found a bit funny, considering every plot that involves the head of a school changing does this. Like, the previous principal was cool and everybody's friend, but now that they're gone, we have to stand in lines and wear uniforms. Peter is rightfully suspicious of Connor's actions, as he's making the students test these different lab components without informing them on what kind of project they're working on. While Peter works on his project with Grady, things take a hard left turn when the compound Grady creates burns to the floor into the project graveyard, and sets off a pulse generator causing a section of the skull to begin to crumble. Miles and Anya come to aid Peter, and afterwards we're introduced to Maria, Anya's stepsister, who's studying for her PhD while helping Dr. Connors with his work at Horizon. Peter recovers a case full of vials among the wreckage, the same vials that Jacko used to create the Rhino. At the end of the last episode, we were informed that Jacko, Gwen's uncle, is still out there, and Gwen has been doing all she can to find him. The team figure out where the serums are being shipped from, and while Peter, Spider-Man, and Ghost Spider head out to find the Jacko, Miles and Anya go investigate why Connors had the serum in the first place. As it turns out, Connors is using the Jacko serum to control himself from turning into a lizard, and it's being supplied to him by an unknown person. Anya and Miles hack into a security drone and find out that within the teacher's lounge, not only are there various jars of serum and their school projects, but also the Venom seed. Miles and Spider-Man and Spider-Girl check it out, where they find the Venom seed is extracting DNA into a chamber, then are caught and incapacitated by Maria. Meanwhile, Ghost and Spider-Man find themselves in the Jackal's lab, where they met with mutated shark hybrids as well as the Jackal. After defeating the sharks and then catch up to the Jackal, but they're too late once he destroys his lab and escapes. Gwen quickly runs through the files and figures out who the Jackal is working for. Peter and Gwen then arrive at Horizon just in time for Connors and Maria to reveal their big plan, where we get the big reveal that everything had been orchestrated by Norman Osborn. It's revealed that Norman has been using the students' projects to merge the Jackal serum with the Venom symbiote and transform himself into the Dark Goblin. Norman realized that Spider-Man's support system is just as strong as his powers, which is where everyone else comes in. The Jackal versus Ghost Spider, Spider-Girl versus the Tarantula, and Miles versus Swarm. This causes them all to be broken up, not being able to fight as a team. The fight in this episode was very entertaining. I especially like how they transitioned from one to another, with Miles shooting a web up in the air, then cutting to Gwen lifting herself up by a whip. After Harry enters the fight, I think that's when they turn the dial up on the animation, and I won't lie, this fight was pretty brutal and a bit moving. It's revealed that Swarm is Miles' father, and instead of being a straight up villain like the others, he turned to this life because during the first season, when Miles attains his powers, the Spider Slayers go after the two Spider-Men, endangering the community, causing a lot of property damage, and Jefferson saw that as an opportunity to protect his family in his own way. When Miles puts the pieces together, Jefferson breaks down and leaves. This moment only lasted about a couple minutes, but made me wonder what a Spider-Man show would look like if Miles was the main focus. It also turns out Maria wasn't Maria at all, but actually the chameleon. Gwen has her moment with the Jackal where he traps her with the synthetic symbiote, where I thought, oh, they're gonna turn her into Venom and she'll have a symbiote suit like she does in the comics. But it turns out he was just tired of being the only Jackal in the family. Miles rescues her and they head to Spider-Girl in order to create a device that would reverse Norman's transformation, considering they were the ones who helped build it in the first place, albeit without knowing it. After a very, very, very entertaining fight sequence, Harry, who defeats the Goblin with the last hit, throws Norman back into the chamber where he's reverted back to his normal form. They then use the footage recorded by the security drones and show it to the school board, causing them to reconsider and allowing Max to get his job back. What this season did for the different Spider people was something I said I hope they did in my last video, which was expand on Miles' Ghost Spider and Spider-Girl, giving them their own story, motivations, and villains. Although I don't see why they added Anya's sister, besides the fact that everyone had their own villain except for Spider-Girl, so they threw her in there. But since Norman, Raymond, and Jefferson were all related to someone on the team, they had enough characters who were evil family members, so they went with the fake out. I did enjoy the Dark Goblin, and part of me wishes he could have been a reoccurring character, but another part of me wishes they just kept Norman dead. The finale, Maximum Venom, is the 58th episode of the series, being written by Kevin Burke and Chris Wyatt, and directed by Tim Elliott and Sol Choi. While Spider-Man and friends attempt to track down the Lizard, they soon find out that Venom has returned to seek revenge on Spider-Man and the Earth as a whole. This episode starts with Spider-Man aiding the Avengers in taking down MODOK, and afterwards it's offered to become an Avenger by Iron Man. Miles, Harry, and Peter are all in one way conflicted about where their plans in life are going. Miles is now staying with Peter and Aunt May, but is paranoid his father might be tracking him. Peter is afraid about the amount of change becoming an Avenger would be on his life, and Harry is trying to move away from Norman's legacy. Although most of the time it's lighthearted, the show has always had serious moments where the characters look back on what's happened and just take a minute to breathe and think it over, showing that this show isn't what some might think, which is why I hope it continues and pushes past what people believe Spider-Man is meant to be and write the story that they want to. Horizon is having a school dance in order to celebrate the return of Max Modell, and Max himself has been working on a new project that he wants to unveil as a celebration, but can't figure out a certain solution. Just like in The Amazing Spider-Man, Peter unknowingly gives an equation in order to help out his mentor, but in doing so, it will lead him to create his own demon. After Grady runs into who he thinks is a lizard, the spiders go in that night to investigate. Instead of Connors, they find Venom. By the way, I always like the animations they use for Venom. I'm not an animation expert, but they really make it flow very well and seem like he is both a liquid and a solid. The next day at the school dance, they have a pairing that I'm very conflicted about. As I said before, I'm a fan of Gwen Stacy more than I am of Mary Jane. For the dance, Peter's going with MJ, Miles is going with Anya, and Gwen is going with Grady. I don't have a problem with Grady. I love Grady, and I probably should be happy for him, since he was able to not only ask Gwen, but her to say yes. Recently, they've been pairing Miles and Gwen together, which just makes a lot more sense to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just jealous of Grady. At the dance, Max reveals a new invention, which is a matter transport portal. During the presentation, they make Max sweat a lot, which only adds to the strangeness his character has been demonstrating this episode. And once he activates the portal to another world, which is when things start going wrong. It's revealed that Max has been being controlled by Venom, which is when the students are evacuated and the spiders jump into action. By using Max as a host, Venom uses the school's arc reactor to restart the power of the spiders turned off, thus turning the portal back on and inviting 3 new symbiotes into the fray: Scream, Mania, and Scorn. Scorn has to be one of, if not my favorite symbiote, just because she's underrated. They kinda beefed her up in this show, but long story short, Scorn's abilities consist of the usual enhanced strength, speed, and agility, but unlike most symbiotes, Scorn is a technological hybrid. This allows the ability to confine itself with various forms of technology. She, or it, or they, whatever the pronoun is for a symbiote, is hands down the most interesting and unique of them all in my opinion, and I really wish Marvel would focus more on the character. Now in the comics, Mania was created by a piece of Venom, Scream is a direct spawn from Venom, and Scorn was spawned from Carnage. But in this universe, they're the ones commanding Venom, and I might get some hate for this, but I like the idea that Venom is the runt of his species. It kind of makes him stronger in a way, how that he can even keep up with his superiors. Spider-Man follows Venom into the portal, leading him to the Clintar's planet, while MJ and Grady have their own mission, trying to get back into the building to check on their dates, who are busy fighting the three new symbiotes. When Venom and Spider-Man entered the portal and began fighting, I thought that Venom, because of how he's being treated, would want to bond once again with Peter and go up against the other symbiotes. But as much as I hoped that would happen, it didn't. Grady and NJ find their way into the school where they stumble upon Scream, Scorn, and Mania, find out that they're searching for the seed, which they plan on destroying the planet with. Venom finds the World Killer and returns to Earth where the other Clintar activate the seed. The symbiote dragon eats it and begins to destroy the Earth. While Miles, Anya, and Gwen fight the symbiote sisters, Spider-Man gets through to Max to the point where Max can temporarily gain control of Venom, and the two defeat the symbiote dragon and destroy the seed, and in doing so, eradicate the symbiote as well. During the midst of the battle, Horizon High is destroyed, giving Max the idea that maybe the destruction of the school was a good thing, wanting a more safer place for the students to attend school, considering almost every threat Spider-Man has faced had originated there. Peter and MJ finally get their dance after their initial one had been interrupted by the end of the world. Spider-Man turns down his offering to join the Avengers, but decides instead to use this opportunity to do something not just for him, but his friends and classmates as well, by using his connection with Stark to found WEB, the Worldwide Engineering Brigade. The episode ends with Peter and friends beginning to build the foundations of their own technological laboratory and looking towards a bright future. I honestly really enjoyed Season 3, and I can't stress enough how much I hope they continue the series. They set up new relationships, villains, and web, so it's not like they completely said goodbye. There's still a lot of potential and story to tell. If they do another season, I'd like to see more of Black Cat. Out of everyone in Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery, she's my favorite, right next to Venom. And of course, I want to see where Miles' story goes with his father. At the moment, there hasn't been anything that's come out stating that the show was cancelled or that it's being renewed. In a recent interview back in October of 2020, Robbie Damon, the voice of Peter Parker, stated that no one's told him anything as of yet. He'd like to do another season, but believes if they don't, they did leave on a good note. Some people think it's been cancelled because of the recent merger, although it's been stated that they wouldn't be touching any of the animation studio's projects. I tried my best to find anything about a season 4, but always found myself on a website that said that it has yet to be announced. So at this point, the only people who really know the future of the series is those over at Marvel, and no one outside of that really knows anything, so we'll just have to wait and see. If they don't continue onto season 4 and just start all over again, I think the most logical thing they could do is, instead of making another show about Peter Parker, center it around Miles and his world, or maybe even a Ghost Spider show. But those were my thoughts on Season 3 of Marvel Spider-Man. Let me know your thoughts or what you'd like to see in the next Spider-Man series, and I'll see you when I see you.